So we're in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and at a school board meeting where CRT, or the equity and inclusivity statement of the school board that's being pressed through subversive agents in local government, is being questioned by the locals. And I just wanted to bring this to you guys because the questioning by the locals is being shut down. This is one of the most amazing examples of how ideological subversion works that I had to go over it with you guys. Now, I have chopped a lot of this out because otherwise it would be a 3-hour ordeal and we just don't have time. But I will put a link to the entire video in its entirety in the comment below the pinned comment. Now, this is the Pennsbury School District, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And we'll go through this a couple of scenes and I'll explain each of the scenes before I show you and why it's important. Because this little bit of theater that's happening is going to be ubiquitous forever, for a very long time. Listen, guys, at the minimum, there's 75 million people that voted for Trump, and every single one of them are against the CRT, critical race theory. They're against equity and inclusivity statements that form policy and change their school districts. They're against it. The subversive nature of critical race theory, the way it feeds ego, when these people feel so good about themselves for being what they consider on the right side of things, and their ego is so habitually fed in this horrible circle. So they've had a couple of school board meetings that have already gone bad at this point, and they are trying to push through this equity statement. And at this point, you could tell, man, they're just really fed up with people from the pesky public coming in here and trying to shut them down. And of course, they've never had pushback like this about anything that they've done, because school board meetings normally don't draw this much attention. But this is, and this does. But the thing I wanted to go through with you guys is just how deluded the school board members are into thinking that they represent the majority opinion of the people in their school district, when they absolutely do not represent the majority opinion of their school district. And yet they're clueless that that's the case. They say, okay, we're going to do public commenting. And first there is a female that that would strike you as a young teacher, who comes in and she's very articulate and she knows all the ins and outs of the equity statement, and you can tell it's obvious that she is sent there by the school board. Now, this is supposedly a public comment time, but I wanted to tell you guys this ahead of this before we watched it, because it's a pattern I see. Because I watch these things quite often. I've brought a couple of them to you guys, and I've watched a lot more. And it seems like as soon as they open up the time for public comment, the first person who comments is always pro, and it's always basically word for word what the school board said themselves. And it's almost like having that first commenter is almost like a way of reading into the record what the school board wants to say about themselves. And I don't know who this young lady is, but I could almost guarantee you that she is in somehow, way, shape, or form sent there by the school board. And I'll prove it to you at the end of this video, because one of the school board members just straight up announces that that's what she does. Oh yeah, yes, she does. So the amazing thing about this psychological experiment that we're looking at here that is so intriguing is that they think that they have the majority opinion of the people in their school district, and they do not. And they think that they're being open and inclusive, and they think that they're allowing people to speak their mind, and yet they shut down every single person who came there to argue an opposing point of view. Every single person was literally shut up and shut down and kicked out. The only two people that were allowed to speak their comments was the first young lady who agreed on it, and another man at the end who agreed on it. And so they kick out everybody who disagrees with them. They shut them down. They have them shout down, rah, 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 and you're going to see it. It's amazing. It's amazing. These inclusive, peaceful people, they do not accept diversity of thought. They want inclusivity and diversity in everything except diversity of thought. And you guys, it's unbelievable. You're going to have to watch it to believe it. But so this is them opening up the comments to their diversity and inclusivity policy that they're bringing in. I want you to pay close attention to the first young lady, all the things that she says, the definitions that she uses, the terminology, and how very similar it is to the actual statement that the school board is wanting to say.
Public comment is an opportunity to offer this time for members of the public to make comment on agenda and non-agenda items. Up to 1 hour has been set aside for public participation. This hour may be extended with the concurrence of the school board. Public comments may be responded to where possible during the hour allotted. Comments that become personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant will be ended immediately.
So everybody would agree with all the things that he just listed until the end. Irrelevant. He just said that that this time of public comment was for public comments both on and off topic. So what is an irrelevant topic? At what point does one person get to say what you're saying is irrelevant? You're done talking. How is that judged? Who created that? How did that get there? They put that there after a few days being abused verbally by all the parents at Bucks County.
Our first public comment is, the person signed up was Elizabeth Lester Aladala.
The first person who signed up? Our first comment is the first person who signed up. What? Well, that sounds a little bit suspect.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm your niece.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Lester Abdallah. I live in Lower Makefield Township and am a resident of Pennsbury School District. I'm here tonight to voice my full support for Board Policy 832 for educational equity. I would like to commend and thank Dr. Gibson, the District Equity Leadership Team, and all those who worked on the equity audit and the executive summary in this policy to strive to make equity the foundation at Pennsbury. I am here as a member of the community in strong support of all that is being done by the school board, administration, teachers, and staff to enable students and staff alike to have a safe and inclusive learning environment here at Pennsbury. However, as is made clear in the executive summary, the policy is only as effective if each member of the community is held accountable in living up to these standards. This is just the beginning. Equity in education absolutely has to be the #1 priority for our school district, and I hope that every parent can.
Imagine that. Imagine an educator whose only concern, and she said this twice now, it should be their only concern, is that everybody get the same education. No concern whatsoever with what education that is that everybody's getting, but just that it's the same.
Recognize that nothing else matters if each and every student is not able to come to school to learn to the best of their abilities in an environment that includes them, supports them, and protects them. Therefore, I urge you to use the responsibilities you have as the members of the board and ensure that resources are adequately allocated to fulfilling the goals of the equity policy and strategic plan, that hiring decisions are made to further these goals, and that each member of the community is held accountable in fulfilling these goals. As the executive summary notes, it is important to move beyond these goals and address the actual day-to-day realities of working at or attending Pennsbury. I know that one such area of interest is hiring more staff from diverse backgrounds, which is an important goal, but it's also important to examine whether this is a school district in which Black, Asian, Latinx, Indigenous educators, anyone from an underrepresented background actually wants to work. Will people who are not white feel like they...
Okay, so it's important to ask yourself, is this a place where somebody who isn't white would even want to come work? Now remember that. Remember that that's the question that she asked there. Is this a place where a non-white person would even want to come work?
They're supported and heard by the administration and staff, and will they feel as if the students and parents will respect them? This must be addressed to ensure, by every member of the community, to ensure that teachers can do their job and want to stay here. In addition, I know everyone here wants every student to feel safe and like they belong at Pennsbury, but that is likely not the case for every student. At a recent presentation by Public Citizens for Children and Youth about equity in schools in the Philadelphia suburbs, a Black female student from Council Rock spoke about her experience of constantly being followed and hounded by the school resource officer. She noted that this officer is beloved by so many white students and staff. We know that this is not unique to Council Rock, so how is Pennsbury making sure that its students are never singled out in the halls or classrooms by any member of staff? I urge each board member to consider how their positive experience with various members of the Pennsbury community may not be this experience of students of color, non-binary students, and differently abled students at Pennsbury. So as you evaluate your actions going forward as a board, I encourage you to live up to the standards set in the equity policy to prioritize educational equity in a continuous and collaborative way, as is said in the policy. In tandem with the strategic goals outlined tonight and in the executive summary, some crucial ways that I urge you as the board specifically to implement the policy is to continue to prioritize racial equity in all of the board's actions, guarantee that the incoming superintendent continues this work, and continue to show support for the work Dr. Gibson is doing, reflect the board's commitment to racial equity in budgeting and planning decisions, review and revise the school discipline policies.
Who wrote this? This is supposed to be a time period where citizens come to speak to their school board. Who wrote this? Are you paying attention?
To significantly reduce the use of out-of-school suspension in recognition of the data presented in the February meeting that it is applied in a racially unequal manner and is inherently antithetical to the purpose of education. Continue to test students early and often for gifted programs and ensure that selection for testing is done across all races and backgrounds. As discussed in the Pennsbury social justice conversation, ensure that teachers are comfortable talking about race and social justice in the classroom and support those teachers who do not feel equipped to do so. Recognize that representation on staff is critical at all levels and provide support for non-white faculty and staff members. Guarantee that there is not a disconnect between promoting diversity, equity, inclusion on the school website or at board meetings, but actually prioritizing it in every classroom and school setting. And please make sure that there are consequences for violations of the equity policy and plan. I realize many of these issues have been addressed in the equity audit and summary, but it is worth emphasizing the importance of eliminating unequitable and discriminatory practices. I know that much of this is on your hearts and minds as board members and agendas, but please continue to prioritize equity in education, first by approving this policy, and then by putting it into action, so that every child can succeed and feel safe here. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. It's like, do you remember that South Park episode where they're smelling their own farts and they're talking about how awesome they are? Like, oh yes, I'm so awesome. Oh, I do things so amazingly. Yes, inclusive, we're inclusive, so inclusive. Oh, it's infuriating. So I didn't interrupt her. I let her go on and on and on. Well, I interrupted her once, right? But I let her go on and on and on. And why? Well, because it's important to let the opposing viewpoint be heard, right? And that supposedly is a very liberal value, right? Well, this is how the school board responds to a citizen who comes in and is agreeing with them. Of course, this lady, actually, her entire speech was written by a school board member, but, that's just an accusation I'm making. I have no proof of that. Except for the fact that she says some of the exact same things as a school board member does a little bit later, but we'll get to that. Point being, watch how they treat citizens they disagree with.
Tim Daly.
So I'm having a little bit of respiratory.
All right, so I'm having to skip a bunch of this stuff, so let me give you some background. This guy is kind of annoying, and he's got multiple lawsuits against the school board going for other unrelated things, and one of those things is about the school board hiring, and they let him go on for quite a while about the other topics, the ones that he's even bringing the lawsuit about, but then he says he wants to talk about the diversity and inclusivity statement, and, well, this is how it goes.
So I'm having a little bit of respiratory issues tonight. Is it okay if I leave it off my nose? Is that fine?
That would be fine.
Thank you, Mr. Waldorf. So, pivoting, I do want to take a moment to remark over the disturbing misconduct by this board during the April school board meeting when members of this board staged a prepared personal attack on community member Doug Marshall. During those prepared attacks, board members misrepresented facts around equities in schools, presented unindexed statistics that have no reflection on Pennsbury.
You know what? I'm going to stop you there. We're not going to tolerate misrepresentation of facts around equity. So that's irrelevant, and you can stop.
In your opinion?
No, you can stop.
Misrepresentation on facts around diversity, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
You know what? I'm gonna stop you there. We're not going to tolerate misrepresentation of facts around equity. So that's irrelevant, and you can stop.
In your opinion.
No, you can stop, Mr. Daly. You're done.
You sure you want to do that to Ms.
Yes,
Bermuzzo?
I do.
All right, we'll see you in court, sir. Just a reminder, you didn't need an equity
I said you're done.
You didn't need an equity officer.
I said you're done. Mr. Daly, sit down.
Doug Marshall.
At the last meeting, the equity and critical race theory audit was reviewed, and the crux of that was that there were different.
I apologize. It's not what it's called. That is not.
That's how I'm addressing it, and
That's not what it's called. It's not what.
That's what I'm calling it.
I understand, but
Then
that's not what it's
your
called.
comments are irrelevant then if you're not going to call it by the right term.
This
This is the equity policy.
You're irrelevant. Your comments are irrelevant if you're not going to use our terminology. That's what this guy's saying, right?
Look. Some people call
It's
it
the equity policy.
All right. I'm telling you what I think it is, but if you'd like, I'll use your term, although I disagree with it. Fair enough?
Equity policy. Go ahead.
he had to say it one more time. You go. So this is that kid that your parents made you go over to his house and you hated him and he wouldn't share anything and he always had to get that last word in. Listen to him say equity policy.
If you'd like, I'll use your term, although I disagree with it. Fair enough?
Equity policy. Go ahead.
At the last meeting, the audit, as it was reviewed, the crux of which the audit said that different demographic groups had disparities or gaps in performance. An achievement gap as reflected in state testing, an opportunity gap as reflected in AP and IEPs, a disciplinary gap as referenced in referrals to the office and suspensions, and ostensibly the primary reason for these gaps was racial, and to a lesser extent economic. One of the board members noted that family upbringing is a dominant factor in what a child believes, although even in a healthy environment, it was suggested that children may learn to incorporate microaggressions into their language and attitude. I agree that family structure is important in a child's success, as evidenced in many reputable studies, but I believe the advocates of diversity, equity, and inclusivity are conflating correlation with causation. They're quite different. The facts are that children raised or...
All right. We're just... You're getting into irrelevant things. We're just going to stop you there. You're done.
Who made you the king
You're
of this
done.
board?
You're done. You're done. We're not going to take it, that is irrelevant.
That's important because it breaks.
You're done, Mr.
No, I'm not.
Yes,
done.
you are, Mr.
No,
Marshall.
I'm
You're
not
done. You are done.
I will sue you as well.
You're done.
No, I'm not.
You're done.
What? Based on what?
Board policy 903. You are
What
now
is it?
being disruptive and disorderly. You're done.
You're the one.
You're done.
Yeah. You know what?
You're finished.
You can count on being sued. I'm going to sue you.
Robert Abrams.
This is what ideological subversion looks like when it's being viciously defended by the useful idiots.
Robert Abrams, Lower Mayfield Township. I want to thank Mr. Daly. While we were sitting here, he got me some numbers. Apparently, what was sent out by the district, 65%, considering for the diversity program, 65% are extremely happy now, 27% were neutral, 8% were unhappy. So we're going to build a multi-million-dollar program for the 8% that are unhappy. I'll bring the 8% in here. Let them meet with all
right. You're done. You're done. We're not going through this again, Mr. Abrams. That is not what the equity program is about. And we're not going to sit here and listen to you. You're done. You're done. You're done.
Honestly, after what you did to the last two, I think you are.
You're done. You've already violated the board policy. According to the policy, your public comment has been terminated.
Jennifer Capolita? No, Jennifer? Okay.
Now, where do you think Jennifer went, guys? After seeing what you just saw, where do you think Jennifer went? She ran. Of course she ran. This bully sits up there and hits everybody with, "You done, son, you done. No, you done, son." And kicking everybody out and telling them they're done, finished, and their comments are irrelevant. And then this guy is like, Jennifer, you ready? You ready, Jennifer? Oh, you're not here. Oh, I wonder where Jennifer went. Completely clueless that Jennifer ran because she had an alternate opinion to that guy who's bullying everyone on the school board. This man is completely unaware of it. He actually just got done watching what he considers inclusivity and diversity and love and peace. That's what he got from that interaction with those three citizens. Now, there's a total of, So there's 3 citizens that we just saw. All of them get told they're done and to get out and to go home. There were 2 that were for it. One was the young lady at the beginning I showed you. Another one is a guy that I'm cutting out. And then there was one lady who ran because obviously she had an opposing point of view and then was terrified by what she had seen. And after all of this is done, after they just act the way that they're acting to people who don't believe what they believe, this is how they talk to each other.
All right, next up, I'd like to combine and approve 7A through 7C and 7E through 7SS for approval. Somebody else second it.
Second.
Thank you, TR. Any discussion?
So this is the policy that is about the critical race theory, or the diversity and inclusivity policy, or whatever they want to call it. I don't want this guy to show up in my house screaming at me that I'm done. This is that document that they're voting on to pass. And you can tell somebody's supposed to be saying something here, but nobody does. And the lady, after he's like staring her down, she's like, "Oh, is this that?" And then she says her speech. But just understand that all of that is pre-planned. They talked about that beforehand. You can see it all go down.
Questions? Again, I went through the stop loss issue. Again, any board policies, anything?
Can I just clarify something, please?
Sure.
Item B, approval of 832 and 922.
Yes,
One of them is the equity policy,
correct.
and is that 832?
It is.
Yes, and the civility policy is the 900 series.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
What we saw here.
So he was waiting on her to get there that entire time. She just didn't know that it was what they were voting on. So now she's going to give her speech that he knew she was going to give. See how he folds his hand and he waits? I'd like to make a comment.
I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
What we saw here tonight was very disturbing on many levels. For a member of the public to come to this table and hold up a yearbook and say that the colors of the faces of the people in that yearbook is what the message is. That the fact that that yearbook is predominantly white means that we have no conversation to be had here. We don't have a problem in this district. We're doing just fine. Talk to all of our children and they'll tell you we're doing just fine. And the truth is that we're not. And that was a shameful, awful gesture for that member of the public to do that. Shame on him.
And she's misrepresenting what he was trying to say. I couldn't honestly understand what he was trying to say with the yearbook because he was being interrupted and screamed at and told that he was done. But that's not what he was trying to insinuate. What all the members of the public have been insinuating over in all of these meetings with this school board is that only 8% of all students surveyed were unhappy with the way the school board was being ran. And they're doing a complete overhaul of all the policies to adjust them based on critical race theory, even though they don't want those words said. That's just one of the ways that subversive agents use to push their subversive policies. They make it wrong to even say the policy out loud. And just watch now, just watch. It'll be wrong to even call it that soon. So let's just go.
Dr. Gibson has taken on this issue with the deepest amount of courage, integrity, intelligence, attention to data that we could hope anybody.
Do you think that she's coming up with all this on the cuff? If you do, I feel really bad for you, because this is all written. And just listen to them pat each other on the back about how awesome they are and how disgusting that member of the public was. And they look at everybody who had that opinion as that way. And they didn't even connect the fact that 2 people spoke and they kicked 3 out. So the majority of the people who spoke tonight were against their policy, and they don't even understand that. In their minds, they are the majority. Not only the majority, but like the vast majority. They think they got attacked by some kind of right-wing conspiracy group, and that's how this has happened to them. They don't understand how it's happening, and it's legitimate. They actually don't know because they're subverted.
Would take on. And Charissa, if Dr. Gibson, excuse me, if we fall short as a board, and we will, because we're learning too, we know in our hearts what the right thing is to do. And sometimes we're stumbling and we're trying to figure out how to act and how to react and when to react and not to react.
Oh my God.
But what you need to know about how I feel about this is that what you are doing is essential. And when we talk about educating...
At the core of this problem is people who talk about facts and figures and people who talk about feelings. That's the core disagreement here when it comes to CRT.
Children and making sure that every child feels like they belong.
There you go.
The only way to achieve that is for children to...
You know, I didn't feel like I belonged at times in school.
...have their experience mirrored in their lives, in their 7 hours a day that they spend in school. And that's going to come through the curriculum. It's going to come through who the adults are in their environment. All of the things that you've talked about. So there's no question in my mind that what you are doing not only needs to happen, not only is it imperative that it happen, but we are not as a board going to sit here and be bullied and battered by people who are coming out trying to intimidate, by getting angry and fluffing up the feathers as if, we're going to back down from something that means so much to this board and to this community.
First of all, the majority of people that came there were against it. Second of all, how deluded is this lady that she thinks it was the people that opposed her point of view that acted that way? Listen to what she says again and tell me she's not describing her fellow school board member and the way he treated the members of their community.
We are not as a board going to sit here and be bullied and battered by people who are coming out trying to intimidate, by getting angry and fluffing up the feathers as if, we're going to back down from...
Getting angry and fluffing up the feathers and bullying and intimidating? Who was it that did that? This woman has the exact opposite perception of what reality is.
Something that means so much to this board and to this community. And if we have to get more people to come out and speak at public comment to counter that kind of behavior, well, then bring it on.
And there you go. And to me, in my mind, seeing as how I had already suspected that young lady that had spoke at first was a plant, when I had already suspected that, when I heard her say this right here, I knew it to be a fact, because she didn't say if we have to start getting people to come out here.
And if we have to get more people to come out and speak at public comment to counter...
If we have to get more people, because they've already gotten some people to come out. That young lady who spoke first. I would go so far as to say that the man that I cut off at the end was also a plant, but I'm not going to get that crazy, and I didn't give him to you guys to look at, so I won't just say that. But you guys, I think it was definitely 3 versus 2, and the 4th one was that young lady who definitely ran because she would have been 4th versus 2. And I think and I know 1 for sure of the 2 was faked, and I'm pretty sure the other one was. And that's the reality. And yet these people at this school board meeting, first of all, one of them knows that they planted that young lady, so they know that lady is not an actual member of the public. And they all sat there and watched 3 of the actual members of the public all be against it, and yet they're still in this deluded state.
That kind of behavior, well, then bring it on. I am more than happy to see this room, as we're coming back into these meetings, packed with people who feel very, very committed to what is so obvious to me and to this board. So
I hope that she gets exactly what she's asking for, because when
it's interesting, right? We're talking about civility and we just had to kick 3 people out of the room today. Hopefully this sets the stage. I think it's probably the first time in my 5 years I've seen this. I'm glad we did. I know things are complex. People have...
It's the first time that he's ever seen people get bullied and kick out during public comment, but he's glad it happened and he hopes that there's more of it in the future. These little totalitarians just cannot help it.
Different understandings. What I don't understand is what is bothering people? You know, like if somebody benefits, everybody benefits. I just don't understand what is bothering people in general. And
if he doesn't understand what people have a problem with CRT by now, then it's a complete unwillingness to actually look. The idea that he's sitting up there as a school board member and thinking, oh, well, the people who came here who are opposed to this, they're just racists, bigots, homophobes, and they don't understand the real policy, and never stop and pause and think, perhaps there's something in the policy that I haven't thought through, that I haven't seen where the origins of this policy came from or what the possible results of it could be. Maybe I need to do some more studying. No, that thought never crosses their mind, because these are just dumb, ignorant racists that are coming in here. And the only thing that they've got for you is surprise that there's so many of them.
I know I've heard this comment about only 22 people applied for the role of superintendent, and we're talking to all the candidates, at least, right? They're also looking at us. If somebody wants to work here or move here, if they watch today's public.
Oh, so there is the school board member. Isn't he saying the exact same thing that the young lady said during the first public comment? We should be thinking if people of color even want to come and apply where we are.
We're talking to all the candidates, at least, right? They're also looking at us. If somebody wants to work here or move here, if they watch today's public comment, people will think about it, right? So everybody should question themselves, how are they contributing to the problem also? I'm glad we are where we are. I'm glad we have a policy. You know, it's not a lot of organizations just talk about all these things, but we're taking action. So I'm excited that this is the start. And I thank everyone for working through this.
Citizens of this area show up, they are not going to be in support of this program. And hopefully this gets out to enough people to where they see that they need to be going to their school board meetings. And if you hear it right here at the end, she's about to give you a Freudian slip, because she already knows what's coming. And the fact that she already knows what's coming, she's already going to be making plans to counter it, folks. Listen here.
Moving forward, I know that this kind of pushback is going to be there, and that is just a given, and that doesn't mean that we don't keep forging ahead and doing what's right. And lastly, I would like to express the importance of people.
That means that she knows that there's going to be members of the public who don't want what they're going to do, but that they need to stick to it and push against the will of the people, because they have deemed it's the right thing to do.
People listening to other people's life stories. To hold up a yearbook, maybe that gentleman should take the yearbook and sit down with every non-white face in that yearbook and have a conversation with every child in that yearbook and ask them what their individual experiences have been, not just in the schools, but in life, walking down the street, driving. Understand people's stories and form an opinion based on people's stories, not selective.
Form an opinion based off of people's stories. And she doesn't want to say what she really wants to say, but the reality to her statement is, don't use facts. Don't form your opinion based on facts and statistics. Form it based off of your feelings and the people that you know's subjective experiences. That's what this woman is arguing for.
Picking out what supports an intentional lack of willingness to really understand what our kids are dealing with.
Facts. Right there, everything she just said was her way of dancing around saying one word: facts. Let's listen to it again.
And form an opinion based on people's stories, not selective, picking out what supports an intentional lack of willingness to really understand what our kids are dealing with and what
Facts, counterpoints, and facts. That's what she's saying don't do.
their life experiences are. So I hope we don't have another display of that here, but I think we need to brace ourselves. And Mr. Amuso, thank you for pointing out what the policy does and does not allow tonight.
So Mr. Amuso is the abuso that has been hurting everybody the entire night and screaming at everybody the entire night. And this woman who is so focused on microaggressions and diversity and inclusivity is so insanely brainwashed that she is thanking this man who has been verbally abusing members of their own municipality. Thank you for enforcing what the rules of the meeting are. That's an interesting way of saying for shutting up everyone with an opposing point of view and kicking them out.
For pointing out what the policy does and does not allow tonight. We're just not going to stand for this every single meeting, for people coming in here bullying and screaming and yelling in ways that are just not acceptable.
Well, you know what, Deborah? I hate to tell you, but I'm pretty sure it's just getting started, Deborah.
Well put, Deb. Thank you.
The other one's about to
just
cry.
add to what Deb said. So thank you for saying that, Deb. It's interesting, right? We're talking about civility, and we just had to kick 3 people out of the room today. Hopefully this set.
It's oh my God. Listen to how insane this is. He says it's interesting that we're talking about civility and we had to kick 3 people out today. And then they all laugh and they're all thinking that those 3 people were not civil. They're not understanding that they were not behaving in a civil manner by kicking opposing points of view out and not letting those opposing points of view be heard. The people who did not act civilly are all sitting here laughing at the people who were kicked out.
And I guess I'm very naive in regard to my view of the public. I've always thought it was important to have more opportunity for dialogue with the board. And I talked in advance and said, hey, I think people can ask questions about things in a relevant way, and I was proven wrong tonight.
Wow. The comment that he has to close this school board member meeting up is that how sorry he is that he thought that he should have public interaction and that the way that the public behaved asking their questions was just so inappropriate. What a huge disappointment. And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he just goes right on and says, you know, we probably shouldn't have any public comment anymore, period, because it just seems like the public is just so dumb and ignorant and backwards.
I'm embarrassed, and I need to publicly apologize to Dr. Gibson, Charissa Gibson, for putting her in that position. It was not the intention. It was to, involve the public, and I've learned a valuable lesson. And I don't think any of us, as the superintendent said, this is not a forum to be berating people and belittling them, and to, again.
Who was berated and belittled at this meeting except for the 3 individuals who tried to present an opposing point of view? The answer is nobody. Nobody was berated or belittled except for the people who tried to speak out against the equity and inclusivity changes to their policy. And he honestly doesn't see it.
The microaggressions, it was just inappropriate, and I'm really sorry that happened to you tonight.
He's apologizing for microaggressions that you and I did not even see. We saw complete, obvious aggression towards people who had opposing points of view, but this man is apologizing for the microaggressions. It's just unbelievable, the microaggressions. I'm just so sorry.
The microaggressions, it was just inappropriate, and I'm really sorry that happened to you tonight. So let's move on to the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The Motion passes.
If we don't start attending the school board meetings, these little Marxists are going to change it all from the ground up. And they will do anything they want as long as there is no opposition. This school board at this county needs to be held accountable by the public. The way that they conducted themselves during this shows that they are completely incapable of entertaining opposing points of view, of being a member of one political party and one group of their electorate, and yet still entertaining the points of view and the ideas of the other side of the electorate. And they are incapable of doing that. Therefore, they should not represent all of the electorate. Understand, these school board members, they represent everybody, Democrat and Republican alike. And so when they run highly partisan and they pick highly partisan issues like this, they're not representing the public. And you guys, we got to start putting people there who can handle entertaining both sides of the argument. You can't have a school board that's completely right-leaning, and you can't have one that's completely left-leaning. And right now there are far too many that are completely left-leaning. And this is what happens whenever one side of the political ideology is snuffed out in America. Really happy to jump in here at the end of this video and give you guys an update. And I was hoping that that lady was speaking into her own future when she said she was afraid that they were going to have more people opposing them come to the school board meetings. And it turns out I was right. She did. Turns out that around the same time, somebody named Simon Campbell came to town. And he's an American, but originally a Brit, and former member of their school board. And what he says here is amazing. He puts these people in their place. It takes a British national American citizen to come to Pennsylvania and actually speak up and not be shouted down by the bully.
I'm also a former member of the Governing Board of Directors, 2009 to 2013. It's nice to see the old faces. I'm here to speak today. I believe, Gary, you said it was item KKK in the agenda book. Well, isn't that just a perfect summation of what it is I'm here to talk about? KKK, your proposed new school board policy, seeking once again to limit the constitutionally protected speech of American citizens. Now, when I sat on this school board, I believe some of you old-timers might remember this. A union guy spoke at public comment for 5 minutes and ripped me a new one. He called me the bastard child of Margaret Thatcher. And I sat there and I said to myself, okay, fair enough. Welcome to America. He considers me a bastard because I'm in the government. His logic is sound. Now, what happened was the superintendent and the school solicitor at the time freaked out and they didn't put the tape online the next day. And I called them up and I said, get the tape online now before we get sued for censorship. I yelled at the solicitor and I asked him what law school he went to, because it was clearly constitutionally protected rhetorical hyperbole. I can cite the case if you'd like. And I said to Paul Long, the superintendent at the time, don't ever cut the tape again, Paul. And by the way, bastard child of Margaret Thatcher, I took it as a compliment. Now, you snowflakes apparently have a bigger problem with public comment. It seems to me that you think you can supersede the United States Constitution. Well, I've got news for you, School Board President Benito Mussolini. Your power does not supersede that of the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment rights of the citizens of this great nation. Let's be very, very clear who has the power.
Mr.
It is
Campbell,
not government policy. Do not warn me or do not interrupt my time.
That if you make personal insults like that again, or if you personally direct your comments, you will be asked to step away from the podium.
I'm going to quote to you, solicitor. I'm quoting, just a minute, do not talk over me. This is my comment, not your comment. I'm quoting to you now from the United States Supreme Court 1964 case, New York Times versus Sullivan. This is constitutional case law in this country, and I'm quoting you from the U.S. Supreme Court. The judges wrote that this nation is founded on the, quote, profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues shall be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials. That's constitutional case law in this nation. I don't have to be nice to you. Nobody behind me has to be nice to you. If you don't like living in the United States of America, then you can all move to Russia, Cuba, or China. This is the First Amendment. And I will caution you, solicitor. There is a video camera to my left. If you edit this tape, then you're going to have a big legal problem on your hands, because my right to critique your fascism, which is what this is constitutionally protected. There are emails, public record emails, in which the Director of Equity is lobbying and advocating for public comment to be censored in this school district. And you know what? Lobbying for it, advocating for it. We've got the school board president saying she'll do better at hitting the mute button in blatant violation of the Constitution for her lobbying and her advocacy of unconstitutional censorship. I want you, the school board, to terminate the employment of Dr. Charissa Gibson with immediate effect. And after you've terminated her employment, I want all of you to tender your resignations for hating on this country. We have a God-given constitutional right to critique you, and we can speak in any lawful tone that we see fit. And don't go looking around, Benito, because this is the United States of America. You have a good... one more thing. I'm going to make a verbal request right now for an unedited copy of the tape. So if any of you delete it, you're going to have a big legal problem. Good night.
So thank God for Simon Campbell. And just as a side note, the way that he handled, because that was the same bully, the "you're done, son, you're done, you're done." Notice how he didn't "you're done, son" to Simon, right? He couldn't get a word in edgewise to Simon because Simon knew his rights and he asserted them. All right, y'all. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Love you. Peace.